Thank you, Niamh. I don't think any of that was deserved, but anyway, how wonderful it is to be here today, surrounded by people who value life, all lives, no matter how small. How wonderful it was to hear the witness of courageous people who are striving to make a difference. Dr. Trevor Hayes, Conor O'Dowd, Isabel Vaughan-Spence, Senator Sharon Keoghan, Deputy Paolo Tobin, and not forgetting the inimitable Niamh Ibreen herself and all the Life Institute team. They each, in their own way, are striving to stand up against the connivance in political, medical, and cultural circles to utterly undermine any remaining respect for the child in the womb. They deserve our respect and our support. It's been 5 years since our unborn children were stripped of their rights. It's been 5 years since abortion was introduced. What's happened in those intervening years? Everything that we said would. We were accused of using the floodgates arguments, and we said that one abortion was one abortion too many, but we said the numbers would go up. The pro-repeal camp said the numbers would come down, that this is what happens when, abortion is introduced. And what happened? As we know, last year over 8,000 abortions were performed in this country, up from 3,000 to Irish women in Britain in 2018. We criticised the abortion of babies with life-limiting conditions. We said that they had a right to live the only life that they would ever have, no matter how short. We said that doctors would be confounded in their prognoses for babies and that sometimes they would get the diagnosis wrong. We were told to trust doctors. And then we heard about the misdiagnosis in Holles Street, post-repeal, parents aborting their perfectly healthy baby because their doctor told them that their child had no chance of living. We said that the introduction of legalised abortion would pose a threat to babies with non-life-threatening disabilities like Down syndrome. And we were told, if you remember, that we were disrespecting people with Down syndrome by Down Syndrome Ireland because we suggested that they were at risk under this new law. Their statement from 2018 is still on their website, we believe. The rate of babies, as we've heard a number of times today, the abortion of babies diagnosed with Down syndrome in the rotunda just around the corner, has gone from 57% in 2016 to 95% last year. To the best of my knowledge, Down Syndrome Ireland has made no statement about that fact. As we predicted, this is what happens when abortion is introduced. The culture changes. We raised the spectre of babies being born alive following abortion. We were ignored or accused of lying and scaremongering. We were told that babies after the age of viability would be delivered alive. Now, this has turned out to be part true, part false. In many cases, the baby is killed beforehand, feticide they call it, and in fact it's actually mentioned as a reality in the recent government report. But in some cases babies have been born alive following an abortion. In other words, they have survived. What the repealers omitted to say was that the babies would be left to die afterwards. We said that abortion would become normalised. And as we know, since 2019, there has been almost 30,000 abortions, and that's not including this year. By contrast, in 2019, 6 infants were placed for adoption. In 2020, there were 5 babies adopted, and in 2021, there were just 2. It is more socially acceptable to abort your baby than to place your baby for adoption and give him or her a chance at life. We said that the taking of rights of children before birth out of our constitution was like giving a blank cheque to the government. It gave them the power to enlarge the scope of what was sold to the people as a restrictive abortion regime. And that's exactly what they're doing now. A government-sponsored review of this year of the 2018 legislation complains about uneven distribution and shortage of services, requiring women to travel, sometimes by public transport, to access a providing GP. It criticises the 3-day wait as presenting a logistical challenge to those who are time constrained. In other words, in this world in which all our demands must be instantly met, it is seen as an inconvenience to have to get a bus to your GP to end the life of your child, or to pause for thought before going ahead with a life-changing decision. Human life has become utterly expendable in the eyes of this government report. The same report calls out doctors who refuse to refer women on to abortion-providing doctors and talks about the ongoing need for education and training on conscientious objection. It advises HSE initiatives to overcome barriers to access caused by conscientious objection and suggests values clarification workshops are the answer. Re-education camps, in other words. The report, perhaps unwittingly, says that criminalisation of abortion per se can be stigmatising for women as it reinforces its social and cultural framing as an immoral and an aberrant act. Exactly. That's one of the main objectives of the criminal law. And the opposite is also therefore true. Decriminalising abortion reinforces the cultural framing of the act as perfectly moral and acceptable, something to be celebrated even. The key findings of the report are that repeal and the legislation that followed were not enough. Even with 8,000 abortions a year, there are barriers to access apparently. We're told that termination of pregnancy has yet to be fully established into the health service, and that there's a need to increase providers and hospital settings to carry out even more abortions. And we're expected to pay for this. The report also recommends the diversion of funding from non-providing hospitals, and I think this is one of the most awful, really terrible elements of the report, where they talk about taking money from non-providing hospitals to give to hospitals that are providing abortion. So in other words, you could be a mother trying to give birth in a hospital, and the hospital you're in with pro-life doctors is going to be penalised financially because they don't provide abortion. It also calls for improved access to surgical abortion. Essentially, the report recommends the unpicking of almost every element of the legislation that was introduced and that people supposedly thought they were voting on. Bad as it was, but it recommends unpicking every element of it to make way for a fuller service, increasing availability, getting rid of the 3-day wait, as we've heard, and the necessity for 2 doctors to sign off on an abortion. Safe zones and positive discrimination in employing those willing to carry out abortions are called for. So in other words, unjust discrimination is justified, according to this report, against pro-life nurses and doctors. So they will not get the jobs if they're not willing to carry out abortions. And also they're calling for the decriminalisation of abortion altogether. This is the brave new world that we predicted back in 2018. But there is hope, and we heard Father Stephen talking earlier about the decision of the US Supreme Court in the Dobbs case. 40 years ago in the United States, a court declared against all reason and justice that there was a right to kill one's baby. This catastrophic ruling led to the deaths of over 63 million people in the US. Pro-life advocates in that country might have been forgiven for yielding to despair, particularly when faced with the juggernaut of the abortion industry, backed by billionaires. But they did not. Not only did they stand their ground, but they gradually, painfully, incrementally gained ground. They fought for a culture of life in a legal environment where abortion had become sacrosanct, and they made headway. The March for Life in Washington, D.C. has become one of the largest annual political and cultural demonstrations in the world, with growing numbers of young people swelling the ranks of those who are tired of the lies of a culture of death. In the new media landscape, people who are unapologetic and energetically pro-life began to make themselves heard. Pro-life activists worked tirelessly both on the ground and in the corridors of power to save individual babies and to persuade politicians of the justice of their cause. Changes to the judiciary took not years but decades to bear fruit, but ultimately resulted in the overturning of one of the worst judicial decisions since the US Supreme Court upheld slavery. The decision in Dobbs was not perhaps everything that the pro-life movement might have hoped for. Professor John Finnis, for instance, argued that the court should have included unborn babies within the Equal Protection Clause of the US Constitution, thereby effecting a federal ban on abortion. Instead, the matter has been returned to the individual states, and so we find ourselves in a similar position to that in which our American brothers and sisters are operating. Legislators need to be convinced to support life. The American pro-life generation is undertaking this task full of optimism after their recent victory, and because their trajectory is in the right direction. Now, maybe it might be a little bit more difficult for us to share their optimism because the trajectory in this country seems to be going in the opposite direction, but we can't lose hope. We must remember that the overturning of Roe and Wade was the work of many thankless and difficult years and of millions of seemingly unanswered prayers. It would be naive for us to imagine that our road will be any easier, but there is a road to be travelled in perseverance, in patience, and in hope. So, what then must we do? We must bring everything into the light. We must shine a light in the dark corners. That way, we can see the dirt more clearly. And the problem for the proponents of repeal is that it shows up the dirt. I want to commend those pro-life commentators in the media who are attempting to do just this, and to particularly commend RIPT for covering stories and shining a light where others would prefer not to look. We need to shine a light on our government and elected representatives, to call them to account for statements and promises they made, to highlight their disregard for the most vulnerable in our society, and to reveal their prejudice towards anyone with a different view to them. They were elected by us, but they don't want to listen to us. We must make them listen. We need to show them our displeasure in the elections, and we need to support those who bravely stand, unafraid to say that they are pro-life. We need to shine a light on the taxpayer-funded NGOs who whisper in the ears of representatives who are answerable to us, the people. The same NGOs that brainwash politicians with their ideologies and demands and influence government policy without any accountability. Shine a light on the state's appointment of those with friends in the right places and the right opinions to chair committees, write reports, and conduct citizens' assemblies. Shine a light on our media. The recent reports on the dishonesty at the heart of RTE are only the beginning. Those of us who were guests on their shows over the past number of years experienced firsthand the institutional bias towards people like us. This is a public service broadcaster that serves only part of the public that agrees with its biases and prejudices. Shine a light on the HSE and the recommendations for dealing with conscientious objectors, the re-education camps for doctors and nurses who do not wish to be part of the abortion industry. Shine a light on the medical profession and its upskilling, which is code for making medical students train in how to provide abortions, ensuring that candidates applying for positions as doctors and nurses are committed to the ideology of death and become skilled in its implementation. Shine a light on how the medical culture has changed. Ultrasound machines are used not as windows of wonder into the womb, but as a means to seek out any imperfection, so that babies who are less than perfect in their eyes can be destroyed before they see the light of day. Shine a light on what effect this has on the way babies with disabilities are treated. Whether they're allowed to live or die depends on the preference of their parents. Shine a light on the reality of abortion procedures and what they do to babies, but also what they do to the people who carry them out. How coarsened and hard-hearted one has to become to do these unspeakable things, and what that does to the culture of a hospital and what that does to society. But it's not all bad. There is good in the world. Let's remember that in the gathering darkness, there are those among us who refuse to give in. And so, we must shine a light on the pro-life people who support women, who give their time, their money, their love, their support and prayers to mothers and babies, to families in need. Shine a light on those who provide spiritual support to those who suffer because of abortion, who offer a kind of healing that no doctor or therapy can offer, who bring forgiveness and healing to those so badly hurt by abortion. Shine a light on the dignity and worth of those with disabilities, whose right to be we have no right to question. Shine a light on all those who have the courage to stand up and be counted, to speak up for those without a voice, whether at home or in school or in work or in the wider society. Shine a light on the beauty of new life, on the inherent dignity of each human being, no matter how small, on the possibilities and the potential that each life brings, on the increase of love in the world with the birth of every baby. Let's do our part to ensure that the light is not extinguished. And let's remember, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. Thank you.